ourselves if we get all these sorted. It's like appendages. Sort out the technical appendages. Yeah, God didn't create you with a mobile phone, so you don't really need one, right?
What about books?
Well, you don't really need them either, but... Alright, so we've been discussing the relationship with God requires awareness of sin, and we're right at the end of our discussion before we had lunch. We were talking about this relationship, weren't we? That you can start to see that while the sin remains, it's going to be very, very difficult to have a sincere desire to receive God's love and act in harmony with that love. And this is the problem we face, is the sin will demand things of us that the love is in opposition to. Right? And because of that situation, we're going to be in a state where now the sin and the relationship with God are basically in disagreement with each other. Right? And then the question then becomes, well, what are you going to do about that disagreement? So as we can see too, the memories which include, you can say, what is spiritual. Now, when we're talking about what is spiritual, we're talking about spiritual principles or spiritual beliefs. Right? So the spiritual beliefs, you can put these in a hierarchy in the order that I've done them. The spiritual beliefs have the biggest effect on you. The emotional beliefs have the next biggest, and the sexual the next biggest, and the physical the last, in terms of the effect on you. So you can see from that the spiritual beliefs, which are stored in your soul as memories, if they are out of harmony with love, they're going to have the largest effect on all of your decisions. Most of your decision making will be happening around those beliefs. And yet the majority of people on earth don't think that way. They don't understand, actually, that almost every decision they're making is based upon some kind of spiritual belief that is flawed, out of harmony with love or a sin. And so what we do when we're often discussing problems, and this is what we notice a lot when we meet with groups of people, is most people start discussing their physical problems or their sexual problems or their emotional problems. Right? And in the process of discussing those things, we're really saying that we think that our main problem are those problems. So when we talk about the physical problems, they start talking about, oh, I'm sick, I've got this illness or this distress in my body. So that's an example of a physical problem, right? And the person who says, well, I'm sick and I want to fix that sickness. So how can I fix that sickness? Now, for a lot of us, what we do is we then go, okay, what does it mean to be healthy? And we start questioning health and, physical health, and I eat better, or I do this better, or I do that better, and, I have the right diet, and I have the right vitamins, and I have the right things, and maybe take some, medicine as well that fixes me physically, not understanding that all of my physical problems come from spiritual beliefs. Right? And the same goes with us sexually. We often go, I've got this relationship issue or that relationship issue or this sexual desire or that confused sexual feeling, and we're not understanding that most of those, all of those things come from our spiritual beliefs. And they dominate what we do. And the same goes emotionally. We're often going that, I've got this emotional problem or this particular problem, in my physical life, but it's really an emotional problem, the relationship issue, friendship issue, all those kind of issues. And we're so embroiled in the issues that we don't see the spiritual beliefs driving them. We don't see that the sin or the lack of harmony with love in our spiritual beliefs are what's causing us to make the choices and decisions we make. So we often make very large decisions, and when I say very large, like life and death decisions for ourselves or others, based upon these things here, not understanding that all of those decisions came from a spiritual belief that's flawed. An example of that is, let's say a woman decides to have an abortion. like she thinks it's an emotion. There's emotional reason for having one, right? And maybe a physical issue that she needs to have one, but actually it's driven by a spiritual belief. Right? So a spiritual belief that's flawed can actually cause you to murder someone else. Right? That's how strong they are. A spiritual belief that's flawed can get you to go to war. It can get you to, harm somebody else. It can get you to harm your children. It can, even the people you love, you often will harm with a spiritual belief that's flawed. If the people you think you love, you'll often harm them because of this flawed spiritual beliefs. So these spiritual beliefs are things that you've got faith in that are out of harmony with love. So in other words, it's corrupt faith. But they're stored in your soul as with an emotional signature. That's why they're so hard to give up. Because inside of you, I feel this is right. I feel this is right. And the people who say or tell you that you must do what you feel is right, that's a very dangerous thing to do if you're not connected to God, right? Because there's a whole heap of things inside of your spiritual beliefs that you feel are right that are completely out of harmony with love, right? And so doing what you feel is right is not necessarily the best course of action, because you must first determine whether what you feel is right is what God feels is right. And that's very difficult to determine when your sin is saying, what I feel is right. Right? When your sin is saying that, you have barely any desire to find out what God feels. When your sin is saying, I think this is right, you're not going to question and ask God, well, what is right? You're not going to use your conscience very much in that place, because inside of yourself there's this feeling, I already think I know what's right. And it's what my sin demands of me is what is right. So, when we start discussing personal issues, which we'll start doing today and tomorrow morning with you, we want to refer you back to this principle so that you can start identifying the spiritual principles that drive, in other words, the spiritual sins, the principles that you're out of harmony with love on, that drive the desire or the feelings or the decisions that you're making. And if you can change spiritual beliefs, a lot of other things are going to change for you, including your way, or the way in which you feel emotion will change. Because even the way you feel emotion is driven by your spiritual beliefs. Right? So you know how a lot of you, you've heard about us talk about emotions and releasing emotions. So a lot of you start to go down the track, I need to release this emotion, I need to have that emotion, I need to release this emotion. Not understanding that unless you get to the core of the spiritual belief driving that emotion, you will not actually release those emotions. Because the sinful belief will continue to drive those kind of emotions. Right? So it's very important to grasp that everything comes back to a spiritual belief. And at some point we need to stop thinking about our physical problem or our sexual problem or our emotional problem, and we need to start focusing on how is the spiritual belief dominating these problems. So it's sort of like having a top-down approach to dealing with your problems instead of a bottom-up approach. Right? So you say the bottom-up approach is a detail-oriented thing, isn't it? It's like just one little thing here and one little thing there, and I notice this little thing and that little thing, and every little thing's got a signature. And it's true that every little thing does have some kind of signature. But when we're just resolving that physical problem or trying to resolve that physical problem, there's a whole heap of things we'll try to do which don't include dealing with it spiritually. And usually we'll take physical action, we'll make physical decisions, we'll use our intellect to take those physical actions and decisions. But we're not resolving the real cause of the problem. Does that make sense? The key is to find the causes of our problems, because the causes are what drives our sinful behaviour. You could say that behaviour the sinful behaviour is the effect of the problem, and the cause is the sinful feeling, the sinful emotion that exists, the sinful belief that exists as a signature emotionally inside of me. That's the real cause. And so we need to become aware of the sin, and we need to get to the state where we're so aware of the sin, you know, what the spiritual belief is and what the emotional sin is, or whatever these feelings are. We need to become so aware of it that we're prepared to repent for them, that we know what we're praying for. You know, we can say to God, oh, I can see I've got a problem with this economy thing. You know, I can see I've got a problem with this love thing. You know, my view of love is all flawed here. I need to change that. And we can pray about the big things, and those big things will have an effect of filtering down to all of the small things that we feel. Oftentimes we feel are bigger than the big things. You see, our priority system is generally, because we're sensory in our nature, in our physical body, our problem is we've got all this flicked around mostly. We think our physical problems are the most important, our sexual ones are the next most important, our emotional ones are the next most important, and if we think about spiritual ones at all, we barely see them as important. Right? So we've got the whole hierarchy of how the law determines the penalty for sin. We've got it all reversed. But actually, the greatest penalties for our sin, the greatest pain and suffering you're going to experience are because of those spiritual beliefs. Make sense?
Could you give an example of a spiritual belief?
Yes, of course. Yeah, Lord. So we'll remember that, right? We'll come over to here. Example of a spiritual belief. Here's one. Love is sacrifice. That's a flawed spiritual belief. Why is it flawed?
Does it require sacrifice?
It's one at a time. Hand up.
God doesn't require sacrifice.
Well, no, you say that, but actually, if you look at most of the teachings on earth,
Yeah.
they say the complete opposite of that, don't they? Like they say Jesus sacrificed his whole life.
Yeah.
Love required sacrifice is what it's really saying.
What does a good mother do?
What does a good mum do?
Yeah.
She sacrifices for her children, doesn't she?
What does a good dad do?
What's a good dad do? Goes off to work every day,
Works hard.
works hard for his family. Sacrifices for his family. Yeah. So, can you see, how do I determine whether that is true or not true? If I've got inside of me the feeling love is sacrifice, what am I going to do with that? Let's look at the actions we will take. So let's say someone says to me, I'd like you to do this thing for me, and you don't want to do it. Right? What are you going to feel? If you got this belief inside of you, you don't want to do it, but you're going to feel what? Guilty if you don't do it.
Right.
Because love is sacrifice. Right? So you're going to do things that you don't want to do. So this is one of the things that gets me to do, isn't it? I do what I don't want.
And what will my relationship be towards personal desire, do you think? How will I view my personal desires?
Whose desires matter to me if I feel this is? Who's first? Others. Others are first. Aren't I also saying then, isn't that always also saying that others are more important to me?
Will I want to know what my personal desires are? Not really, will I? Because it might make me feel like I don't want to sacrifice. So I can end up disconnected from my own personality.
So I'll become disconnected from my own feelings. So there'll be a disconnect from my own emotions. Right? Anything else that will happen?
Judged for not doing the sacrifice.
Okay, other people.
Bad person.
Yeah, I'll be treated as if I'm a bad whatever, mother, mother,
Sister,
son, sister, daughter.
and I'll feel that about myself, won't I?
Yeah.
And that'll stop me from potentially taking loving action, because to do so I'd be conceived to be a bad mother, son, husband, wife, whatever.
What will I teach my children? What kind of beliefs might they grow up with?
Expect to love themselves as much as they love others. It's always equal, never is more.
Yeah, but if I have this
this
view, I
belief-
won't teach them that, will I?
Oh, of course.
But I'm going to teach them the opposite, that they have to love me more than they love themselves, or they have to love somebody else more than they love themselves, won't I?
Or that
That they have to, or they should be loved more than other people are loved.
they're more important than
They're
me.
more important than I am. Yeah. So I'm going to teach my children. So
False
you could say
beliefs.
false beliefs. That I'm now teaching others.
One step ahead of yourself.
I'm more than one step in. So I'll be teaching others false beliefs. Yeah. So not only am I now affecting my own life, I'm also teaching anybody who I can teach through my interactions with them, whether it be my children, my family, my brothers, my sisters, my fathers, my mothers. I'm teaching them that love is sacrifice too. Right? And so what kind of religious belief am I going to accept?
Christianity.
Highly likely, am I going to accept a
First
belief
shall be last.
that teaches that love is sacrifice? Aren't I? So my whole religious faith is now probably going to be accepting of that. So that's a spiritual belief, which is false, and it's causing hundreds of problems.
Even my physical body will get worn down, won't it?
Yet I would exhaust myself helping others, won't I?
Yes.
I'll do things for others when I'm tired and I'm exhausted and I can't do any more. I'll still keep doing. So that's going to cause me physical problems, physical sicknesses, and so forth. And if I'm doing things for others to earn their love, that's probably going to even eventually cause cancer and because a lot of cancer is a result about these kind of things. So I'm going to have some potentially life-threatening diseases come into my life as a result of this one spiritual flawed belief.
What about sexually? What might I do
What will I
sexually?
do sexually?
Have sex when you don't want to.
Have sex when you don't want to. Yes. So that's very common, isn't it? Where,
Yes.
particularly in a marriage or a partnership, where people have sex with their partner when they don't really want to, they're not really engaged. So it's saying love is sacrifice. I've got to sacrifice myself.
We end up being just really unhappy,
Yeah.
angry.
And angry. That's another penalty of believing this.
And then
You
you
end up
feel
angry because you're always sacrificing yourself and no one seems to appreciate it. And of course you're going to attract people who don't appreciate it. Because you're going to say, I'm here for you, for everyone around you. And of course there's going to be people who think, yes, you are here for me.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll take that as much as I can. And so you'll attract people who are more using of you than would otherwise be the case.
Wouldn't you also say, if you love me, you should be sacrificing
Correct.
for me?
Correct. So you will start saying, unless a person's sacrificing for me, they don't love me. So you'll be looking at everyone in your life, like your husband didn't sacrifice for you there, you wanted him to go and get a certain type of drink and he didn't do it, he forgot about it, he didn't love you. He should have sacrificed his life to do that for you. He should have, you're looking at, say, contraception and you go, well, he should get the vasectomy, because he should sacrifice his body for me, because that's what love would do. You've got, there's so many things now being affected by the one spiritual belief. Can you see that? So if I fix that spiritual belief, can you see how many emotions I'm going to have to confront? I'm going to have to confront people's anger with me, their challenge of me. I'm going to have to confront my own guilt. I'm going to have to confront my feelings of inequality that I have in myself and others. I'm going to have to confront why don't I want to find out what I want to do and do it? I'm going to have to confront my own desires. What are they really? If they're harmonious with love, why aren't I doing them? I'm going to have to confront all that. And if I'm not doing them, then what fears do I have of all you, of all the other people, as to why I'm not doing them? You know, what do I need from other people in order to feel loved? I'm going to have to confront that. I'm going to have to confront that actually I expect that other people should love me by doing things for me. Nobody has to. And I'm going to have to confront that I'm going to let all you off the hook for loving me. I'm going to let my partner off the hook for loving me, my friends, my children, everybody off the hook, you know. I'll have to confront all of that. And imagine, so if you can deal with that one spiritual belief, can you see, huge amount of your life's going to change. Right? Now, when we say love is sacrifice, the average person goes, oh yeah, I can see love isn't sacrifice. You know, I feel God's truth is love isn't sacrifice. But when it comes to actually doing all of these things and changing them all, can you see the average person could go, what the? Like, that's a lot to change. That's a lot of things this is affecting. And I'm scared. I'm scared of changing. I'm scared of making these adjustments. You know, everybody's going to be upset with me one way or the other if I make that change. And this is the important thing, is if you've had this view that love is sacrifice, you've probably had it most of your life. And almost every relationship you've established up until now is based on it. So when you change it, who's going to be upset? Almost everybody you've got a relationship with right now is going to be upset about it. And you're going to have to deal with that. And the average person looks at all that and goes, what is their sin now saying?
Don't do it.
Don't do that. It's easier to keep love is sacrifice. It's easier to not change that. It's easier to, you know, keep that view and keep serving and others, and, you know, even if it means disconnecting from myself, it's easier to do that. And what are we now doing? We're now insincere when we're asking God for love, who also believes love isn't sacrifice. And now we're going to be very insincere. Our sin, which is saying, I can't handle the consequences of me doing the right thing here. Right? Our sin is saying, don't do it. And so you're now going, well, I don't know if I want God to love me anymore, because if God loves me more, I'll realise love isn't a sacrifice. And then I'll have to take actions in my day-to-day life where I understand that love is no longer a sacrifice, and that's going to cause lots and lots of problems in my life, is what the average person believes. Of course, you could actually, if you actually knew the truth, you'd realise it's going to create a lot of freedom in your life. Right?
When you say confront it, do you always have to go, like if there's, you know that there's going to be this altercation with someone, and it's because you're sharing something, do you always have to confront them, or do you just have to confront your emotions with
No, you don't have to confront them at all. If you just do the thing that the love demands, which is to no longer sacrifice, they will have their response, won't they?
And a lot of times when we talk about confronting, that's all we mean. It's not about you going and telling someone something.
Yeah.
It's the fact that when you shift
You're
on
confronting
something,
yourself.
you confront something in yourself and are humble to it. Other people around you will be emotionally confronted.
Yeah, by you just doing the loving thing. They're going to have their reaction. Some of them might go, oh yeah, you're right.
Good, I'm glad you're doing that. Yeah.
Although if you've done it your whole life, it's probably unlikely many of them will think that way, right? They'll go, what's wrong with you now? You've heard this divine truth thing, and look at you, you've become a selfish brat, you know, like you're now just looking at your own desires and what they are, and, you know, don't you understand that this is the world's view of love, and you're now got a different view of love, and that's all flawed. That's how they're going to feel, isn't it? And particularly that you've been doing it for years and years and years and years with them. It's like, for them, they're going to have to give up some major addictions with you by you no longer doing the love is sacrifice thing. They're going to have to give up some major addictions, and the average person doesn't want to give up their addictions. How do you feel when you have to give up yours? You get angry and upset and bitter and twisted, right? So that's probably going to happen with them, but it's not going to be your fault that happens. right? But it is going to be something you have to be prepared for. It's happening, aren't you? If you're going to do the right, loving thing, yeah.
So if we wanted to expand to like everything, like can we say, for example, that a spiritual sin is any type of belief that it's against God's
Love.
idea of okay. So
Yeah.
so if we know like what's
Or
the
God's
right-
idea of truth, or God's idea of humility, or God's idea of faith.
and all of those would be like under the category of like
Spiritual
sin.
sins.
Okay.
Makes sense?
But you can see, can't you, from just that example, how that spiritual sin affects you emotionally, physically,
Physically,
sexually.
Yeah.
In all areas of your life, that one spiritual sin actually impacts every relationship, or your
Every
relationship to
friendship.
yourself, your sexual expression, your expression of desire, the way you express emotion, because you often feel guilt and shame if you don't sacrifice, and you feel guilty if you have your own feelings. And so you can see that the spiritual belief is actually governing a lot of your emotional, sexual and physical life,
Yeah.
and the consequences in your physical, sexual and
So all the
emotional
pain and
life.
suffering you're having is also because of false belief.
So can I ask another?
Yeah.
So if we apply to a sin, because I don't see my sin in the moment,
Yes.
and so I don't know exactly what's God's truth in that particular area.
Yeah.
Then how do I assess that that's a problem, like from the pain, and then like I'll be like,
Well,
I'm in
it's a
pain.
good question, isn't it? Because it's like, of course, the easiest way, and this is something we've said our entire trip actually, the easiest way is that if you have the conscience operating, then of course, you know, God can share with you what the truth is. But unfortunately, your sin is saying, don't listen to the conscience. So if you're in a sin, highly likely your conscience is not operating on that subject. So that's now, you're unable to do that. So what do you do now? Well, now you've got to somehow attribute, don't you, the pain and suffering you have with the cause of it, which is the sin that you're committing. And it's usually a spiritual belief, starting with a spiritual belief. So somehow you're going to have to join those two things together. But it's going to be difficult because people will make suggestions to you and you say, oh, I don't think it's that. And then and you'll read things and you go, oh, that doesn't apply to me. You know, because the sin is saying, no. Like, don't become aware. If you become aware, you'll change, and we don't want you to change.
Like with this sin, you know, love is sacrifice. And if you're getting tired and you feel like, oh, people don't really love me, they take me for granted, I want more love in my life, you'd be tempted to think, I just have to do more for others to get more love. That, you know,
Which is going to make you more tired.
yeah. So you're not attributing the pain to the sin in
Yeah.
that instance.
But then how do we?
Yeah.
So then the question becomes, well, what do I do?
Yeah.
You know, like, the sin makes me insincere on so many levels. The sin is saying, don't face the truth. The sin is saying, don't listen to God. The sin is saying, don't listen to your conscience. The sin is saying, don't attribute your pain and suffering to me, the sin. Attribute it to something else, like, you know, it's a medical problem, it's a physical problem, it's somebody else did it, it's not my problem. It's, you know, the sin is saying, it's anything but you, basically is what the sin is saying. And so while I'm in this state where I am not yet aware of my sin, can you see, it's damn tough to come to the conclusion that, this is happening because of my sin, right? It's really tough, and this is why self-analysis is going to be something you're going to have to develop, and it's going to have to be far more sincere than you've ever had your entire life. It's going to have to be so well refined, your self-analysis, where instead of blaming everybody else for what's going on, you're going to have to focus on what's going on with my false beliefs. There's something going wrong here. You know, there's something happening here.
And also, it's not going to be, if you've got this sin, you've got to come to terms with the fact that it's not just going to be an overnight realization.
No.
You know, the
Well, you've got so much
sincerity-
insincerity.
Yeah.
How can it be?
You have to develop the sincerity over time and stay kind of in the process of seeking the truth about what the sin is. A lot
Now,
of,
you can pray,
yep,
but if you're insincere, that won't be answered.
yeah.
You know, you can talk to somebody else, but if you're insincere, you're probably not going to listen to what they say anyway.
And so becoming more and more sensitive to your pain is often the thing that makes people develop sincerity.
That's right.
Because they're like, this hurts so much, now I'm willing to look at something that before I wasn't willing to look at. So sadly on earth, often it's that pain, the build-up of pain, that causes people to seek truth more sincerely.
Yeah.
The additional difficulty on earth, though, is that most of us are really adept at tuning out of our pain. You know,
Even
and
our physical pain.
our society is very geared for us to do that. So you even require sincerity to tune into your pain.
Yeah. And when you look at emotional pain and spiritual pain, most of us are completely unaware of that pain. Like, so every time you engage love is sacrifice, there will be spiritual pain when you do it, and there's going to be emotional pain when you do it. It's going to feel bad doing it, right? So there's the sin that says it feels good because I'm avoiding all of these other problems. But the emotion saying, no, it feels bad. But so what do? You just detune from your emotion. Just detune from how you feel. It requires a disconnect from your own emotion. Once I disconnect from my own emotion, I can manage the feelings. Because my emotions are not tied up with my feelings anymore. But the trouble is now I'm disconnected from my emotion in pretty much every aspect of my life. So now I become like a robot just doing things. The sin is dictating me doing them, and the emotion is screaming at me, but I'm just ignoring it and detuning from it as much as I'm able. So it's going to require emotional connection. It's going to require honesty with yourself, humility, the ability to feel your own feelings. It's going to require that you are willing to accept truths that are outside of your current scope of understanding, and that you're willing to look at everything. It's going to require the degree of sincerity that requires you to become so not self-critical but self-analytical, right? Where you can observe look what I did there, and look what I did there, and look what I did there, and what does that prove? The fact that I did that and I said that, what do those things prove? So if you're saying that somebody comes along and says to you, you know, my mum's demanding me to, and this is how the law of attraction works, by the way. Let's say you have the belief that love is sacrifice. Somebody comes along to you and says, oh, my mum's demanding, she's got Alzheimer's, she's demanding that I look after her for the rest of my life. She's only 55 and she's probably going to live another 40 years. And she wants me to look, and I don't feel like doing it, but I feel like if I love my mum, I will do it. And you internally you'll be going, yeah, if you love your mum, you'll do it, because you're going, love is sacrifice. And then you go, how would I feel in that situation where for the next 40 years of my life I'm going to be just caring for my mum who doesn't want to remember anything? How's that going to be? And you're going, well, you start seeing, well, that would be a pretty painful thing to do. But now both of you who have got the love of sacrifice belief are discussing a matter that obviously is being brought to you or brought to your attention to help you work out whether love is sacrifice or not, right? And what would love do in this circumstance, right? And if you're not prepared to be really open about the discussion and work out, okay, do we want to do that for 40 years? Are we being honest about the fact that do we want to look after our mother or our father for the next 40 years of our life, just because love is sacrifice? Or do I want to have my own life still? You know, what do I want? And be honest with myself about that. And then we can come to the conclusion of maybe solving some problems using a different method, which might be a shared care or some other thing that means my whole life is not sacrificed for the sake of somebody else's life. You follow? Mm-hmm. But the law of attraction will bring you events to try to highlight these things to you. But while you're in your sin, you're going to be going, oh, that just happened because of some other reason, you know? Yeah. And there'll be spiritual beliefs and emotional beliefs and sexual beliefs that are going to be confronted through this love of sacrifice. So there'll be things like happening where you have a partnership, you know, where a sexual partnership with somebody, and where you're in a romantic relationship and that person wants you to keep sacrificing for them all the time. And after a while you feel upset about it, because it doesn't feel very loving when you're on the receiving end of it. And then you go, okay, this must mean that I think love is sacrifice because I keep sacrificing for them. So why am I doing that? What am I afraid of? What am I scared of? So you can see if you're truly honest about the events in your life, you will come to the conclusion that there must be problems, spiritual problems that are causing these events. Right? But the average person with their sin goes, it's not the sin. There must be some other reason. You know, I'm just getting tired. It must be because, that's what it is. I've now got
An iron deficiency.
an iron deficiency, or I've now got, go to the doctor and he says, and of course, physical problems do come about from spiritual problems, by the way. Because when you have a spiritual problem, it affects your physical body by sucking energy out of certain parts of your body that would otherwise be repairing. So spiritual problems do cause physical problems. In fact, diseases to the point of death can occur with a spiritual problem. It starts with a spiritual one, ends up being very emotional, and then turns into a sexual and a physical problem where that ends up killing you. Right? That's frequently what occurs on earth. Almost all diseases in Western civilization are caused by the spiritual problems. Right? So, and I say Western civilization in particular because in other civilizations where there's not enough food to eat for the day, sometimes a physical problem is caused by a physical problem. But it's very rare in societies that are well fed, cared for medically and otherwise. It's very rare that the problem would be there unless there was some spiritual problem causing it. Yeah?
I know last weekend you were talking about the principles one is the principle of equality.
Yep.
And when I'm looking at this, as we're discussing this, what I
Yep.
see right here, others are more important, or others are first, which is going against that
Equality.
principle as well.
Correct.
And you've explained that that's a very big one.
Well, look, see, you could say that love has all these sub aspects to it. Equality is a very important sub aspect to love, right? So there are other qualities that are very important too.
Yes.
But equality is one of them. So, and with any sub aspect to love, you can't have one sub aspect to love at the avoidance of another sub aspect to love. So, an example of that is that love is equal and love is also compassionate. So, you can't sacrifice equality for the sake of compassion. You understand?
Yes.
To be loving, it's got to be compassionate and equal.
Yes.
Yeah? So, and this is the problem with most of us, we are used to the old, here's another one, love is compromise. So we can do that too, can't we? Love is compromise. You know, you go to, let's say you've got problems in a marriage, compromise. That's right, isn't it? And you've got a problem in a marriage, and love is compromise. So you go to get some help, to a psychologist so they can get some help. What do they say? So, they coming from the point of view that love is compromise.
Yeah.
Or you could say love is negotiation, right? Another way of saying it, isn't it? So they're going, right, you've got to negotiate a better deal. And I go, love doesn't need to negotiate anything, but the belief on earth is that love is compromise, right? So now I'll compromise the principle for love. But it's not love anymore because I've compromised the principle, right? But I'm thinking, no, I compromised. I compromise equality for it. I compromise compassion for it. I compromise compassion for myself for it. I compromise in terms of what do I want versus what does the other person want. I compromise what I want for the sake of what they want. And we go, well, it's your turn now, and then it's my turn next time. And all of these kind of things. And then when the person has two turns in a row, and mine have two turns in a row, then I'm starting to get pretty complicated now because I'm going, this is not just, right? This is not just, because compromise requires, you compromise twice, I shouldn't have to compromise twice, because a lot of times we're quite selfish about it, right? But obviously, if I believe that, there's a whole slew, we could rub out this list, couldn't we, and we could write another 10 pages probably of all the things that love is compromise is causing me to do. right?
Have you also said, I think you have, this is a big one, I think for most of us, certainly for me, love is not justice. Is that correct, or have I misunderstood?
Yeah, like what does pure justice demand? Isn't it eye for an eye,
Yes.
tooth for a tooth, life for a life?
Yeah.
That's what the average person would consider to be justice. Yeah. So that's a very, very old concept. You know, it began thousands and thousands of years ago as a concept that a life for a life, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. So in other words, let's say you have a child, I have a child, and you kill my child, right? Then I've got the right to kill yours.
Right.
Right? That's justice.
Right.
It's not very just for the child, is it? No. So oftentimes what we believe is just is not really justice. Now, from God's perspective, love is justice,
Oh, okay.
but not the justice that we expect.
Not our idea of justice.
Yeah.
Not an eye for an eye.
No, our idea of justice is somebody gets punished, then you punish another person. You know, somebody gets hurt, you hurt another person. That's our idea of justice. See, God's idea of justice is somebody hurts somebody, then you redeem him. That's God's idea of justice.
Okay.
He requires redemption, you know, which is not any, like, you propose that to the average penal system in the world, and the average population would become outraged with that concept, right? That they require redemption, not killing. So let's say there's a murder and we want to redeem the man. Justice requires he gets redeemed.
Yeah.
Yeah? But the average human concept is justice requires we kill him. Right? So God's view of justice is not the same
Okay,
as
so,
ours.
sorry, so love is justice, it's just God's view.
God's view of justice.
Thank you very much. for that. Thank you.
That's right. So
Could you give us a couple of examples of false beliefs with faith?
sure.
We could do it with truth, faith.
We can do it truth, faith, humility. Can't we? The big four, shall we call them? Alright, so where should we go with that, babe? It's your choice.
Faith. We can match truth and faith. If I tell the truth, I'll be alone forever. That's an example of faith. That's a faith for my future.
Or if I tell the truth, I'll be attacked.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of you are worried about that, right? So a lot of faith-based issues start with if.
If then.
Attacked. So if I tell the truth, I'll be attacked. Now, if that's your faith, so that's a corrupt faith, isn't it? So there's a corruption there in faith. But what are we going to do under those circumstances if I believe that?
Lie.
I'm going to lie where possible, and particularly I will lie when there's the high likelihood of attack.
Yeah.
Right?
So I'll lie when my feelings, beliefs, ideas are dissimilar to those people around me. I'll be prone to lie, won't I?
Could you say that again, Mary?
When my feelings, beliefs, or ideas are not the same as the people around me.
Yeah, so I'll be prone to lie. So I'll lie when I disagree with others. Yeah. So somebody says, "What do you feel?" And you go, If I say what I really feel, right, then they're going to be pretty upset. So let's say, just simple ones that I've given in the past, like, wife asks her husband whether she bottom looks big in the jeans. Like, what's the wife often looking for under those circumstances? It's like, no love, it's all great, you're going to get sexy bottom, right? And the reality is he might feel, yes, it is big. Whatever you put it in. Whatever you put it in. So you may feel that, right? So and it doesn't matter whether it's jeans or bathers or dress or is still big. Now, if he was telling the truth and he was honest with himself and with her, it's to her advantage that he actually would tell the truth, but she might not feel it's to her advantage, right? And then he'll be going, well, she's probably going to be upset. And sometimes a man in this situation feels like set up. You know what I mean? Like, if you say nothing, well, that's treated to be a yes. And if you say what you actually feel, then that's going to be attacked. But if you say the opposite of what you feel, she's going to know that it was a lie. And so either way, it's not going to work, you know. And so a lot of guys, you know, try to even just completely disconnect from the question and distract and use other techniques to get away from it. Which, by the way, is another thing I'll do. I will minimise. I will justify.
Avoid.
I will shift the blame. In other words, I'll blame people that are not even to blame. Right? For something that I've done. Yeah. Minimise, justify, shift the blame. What else?
Avoid circumstances.
Yeah, so I'll avoid taking action. I before avoid. Is it?
Yeah, that's
Yep.
Avoid action.
avoid certain situations.
I'll avoid situations. Avoid action. I'll just put in there situation. In other words, if something I know is going to be challenging and I'm going to be asked to tell the truth, then the best thing to do is to not be there in the first place.
You avoid people too.
You avoid people, yes, certain people, yeah. Well, that person is a bit more honest person. They're going to know that I'm lying, so I better not be with them. So they'll know. And this is how often people are with me. It's sort of like, damn, you notice that I'm lying. Sort of like, and they get so worried about it that they won't even spend any time with me at all. Right?
There's another thing I do. I get secretive, don't I?
Secretive.
I have a double life.
Oh, yeah.
And attack others.
Secret. Yes. Yeah.
Why would I attack others when I have this belief?
Fear.
Fear of what though?
Yeah, fear of what? Let's be
Holding on
specific.
to the sin.
So if the belief is I tell the truth, I will be attacked.
So they hurt them before they hurt me.
Yes, that's so often the view, isn't it? It's like if I disconnect the person from their attack, so that they get so distracted by what I'm doing to them that they don't think about what, you know, the truth is, then it's a distraction from everything then, right? So you think of politicians are very good at that, aren't they? Yeah, they lie a lot, right? And a lot of times they lie for this particular reason actually. They lie because when a politician tells the truth, then everybody's in an uproar. So politicians often learn that the best way to handle you is just to lie to you most of the time, right? And then you won't be in an uproar so much, even though oftentimes you know they're lying. There's nothing to address, and you're not going to be in uproar so much. But when they admit, yes, we did do that or we did do this, everybody gets so attacking and belittling, and not only that, like violent oftentimes, that the average person goes, I don't want any of that, so I'm going to avoid telling the truth altogether. Yeah?
Lie to yourself.
Yes, you end up lying to yourself, yes.
And what about, like, these are sort of interpersonal things, but what about my spiritual path? What will I do with that? You know? Because if part of telling the truth is just being myself and following my own interests and what I believe to be truthful, if I think I'm going to be attacked from that, I'm going to become a very passive person, aren't I?
Yeah.
I'm not going to follow any direction.
I'm not going to say to anybody, I don't believe that.
Or I believe this.
Or I believe this.
And I'm taking this action because I believe this.
Many of you have got this problem with divine truth, right? You know you have. Because a lot of times when somebody says, what do you believe? You go, How do I say it? Minimise explanation. That's my best way of doing it. Of course, you're not then experiencing the joy of sharing truth with somebody anymore.
Because that's the penalty.
Because that's the penalty. Yeah. There's a lot of joy when you share truth with others. But yeah, we get so worried and stressed out about it. So this belief is even saying, I believe I know the truth, but I'm not going to share it. Because if I share it, I'll be hammered. I'm not sharing it, and I'll just keep to myself about it. You know, and we've met, actually, on this trip even, we've met people who live almost in the same towns and haven't even talked to each other about it. It's like, you know, where it's taken, within a group in Canada, it took them 10 years to meet some of each other who are in the same town, believing listening to divine truth.
It's a town of, I think, 5,000.
Town of 5,000 people.
And they would just meet and just have these kind of conversations about soulmates or just other things. And eventually one of them
It
said,
came out.
I've been watching this thing. And the other one said, so
So
have
have
I."
Eventually it came out. And it took years. It took years to come out. And this is because of this, yeah? We get so worried about sharing truth with others and what they're going to do with it. And so the faith is, telling the truth is not a good thing. The faith is, telling the truth, I will be attacked, so I shouldn't tell the truth. I should try to keep the truth under wraps most of the time, is really the faith, what the faith is saying. It's a corrupt faith, but it's going to cause you to take a lot of sinful action. Minimizing is a sinful action, justifying is sinful action, shifting blame onto others, sinful action. Avoiding loving action is a sinful action. Avoiding the situation is a sinful action. Avoiding people, sinful action. Why wouldn't you love people? You know, being secretive is a sinful action, actually. Like lying when I disagree. It's good for you to disagree with people. It means that discussion can be had. That's a good thing, because there are times when you might be wrong and they might be wrong, and you can discuss it. But if one of you is going, oh yeah, I don't believe that, and the other one's going, I don't believe that, and both of you do, or vice versa, it's going to be very hard to have a discussion, right? And so you're going to find that the faith, which is saying tell the truth is bad, if you change that faith to telling the truth is great in every circumstance, can you see that will change a lot of your life? You're going to tell your truth to your partner, to your friends, to your children. When your children come up and ask you, what happened here, mummy? You tell them the truth. What happened there, mummy? Oh, you tell them the truth. What happened there, dad? You tell them the truth. And why don't you like that person? You say, this is why I don't like that person. You say, oh no, I'm good. I don't mind that person, you know. So you'll tell them the truth. And they will learn that telling the truth is good too, in their day-to-day life as well. They will learn that. But if you have a corrupted faith that says, no, it's not good, it's going to have many, many flow-on effects in your life. Yeah, even right down to physical problems. You can get thyroid problems from not telling the truth. Right? That's a physical problem that's created because you're not telling the truth. Right? You're not sharing the emotional truth with other people in your life. That kind of thing. Yeah.
There was this one time along the lines of what you're talking about. So, in terms of telling the truth to children, there's this one situation that I was in which I was sitting with my housemates, and they invited their daughter and boyfriend to come, and his cousin, and the couple, the housemates that I had, they had a girl who was maybe about, I don't know, 9, 10 years old, and the uncle makes a lot of sexual innuendos.
Yep.
And he'll be, I don't know, they're doing something with their fingers or something, and then everyone's snickering, and then the child is like, why? What is everyone laughing about?
Tell the child the truth.
And I was at just, and I didn't even know what it was, and then one of the daughters had to be like, it means something in the pink or the stink or something like that, you know, and I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
No, not really. I don't think we need to know.
So anyway, I said, well, if she wants to, I was like, I didn't know that's what that meant, you know, and they were all trying to avoid the situation, and I said, and somebody said, oh yeah, it's a yoga thing with these fingers, and so I said, why don't you just tell her the truth? And then I was like, if you guys don't tell her, I'll tell her.
Yeah.
So I said, so like, I feel like so what, you know, just let her know.
Yeah.
And all of the adults came down really hard on me. They're like, not at this age, not at this age.
Yeah.
And And I'm just like, eventually she has to learn about sex anyway, you know, and what happens and what people do. And anyway, but everyone came down really hard on me, and
But also there's another truth that everyone's not looking at, even you.
Okay.
The innuendo coming from the uncle.
Yeah.
Why isn't that being addressed?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he's
Exactly. I
being
said, well,
sexually sleazy all the time, why isn't that being addressed?
Yes.
Yeah, that's going to have more probably damaging effect on the child than even not knowing the other issue.
Yeah. Because I guess I was addressing that, hey, look, like, I was that child once, and I just hated feeling like I was left in the dark and everyone else is on this joke.
Yeah, but can you see how your stored memory
Yes.
is now impacting what you think is important in the situation?
Correct.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Rather than God's view is like, hang on, there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, the bigger problem is the attitude of the adults
Yeah.
with each other sexually,
And the child,
and the child,
actually. Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, so quite often we latch on to even a small problem because we wish to avoid the even bigger problems in the circumstance, right? So in the company of children, sharing things sexually can be done very openly and honestly and forthright, right? If it's not done in such a way, it's going to create an atmosphere of shame, and it's going to create an atmosphere of guilt, and it's going to also create an atmosphere of not understanding or knowing as well. Now, all of those things are going to be damaging to the child, but also the fact is that if an adult can't talk honestly or openly about sexual matters, then it also means they contain shame, they have shame that they're not addressing or feeling through either, right? And then on top of that, you've got people who are sexually sleazy need to be addressed, because they're dumping their sexual feelings on others and oftentimes on children, and that obviously is going to be damaging to those people that they're dumping it on. And even the attitude coming from a man, for example, that he looks at every woman he sees as a sexual object is something that needs to be addressed, right? And of course, in most societies, these are never addressed, until it gets extreme. And when I say extreme, it has to be like child abuse or rape or, extreme, right? Because if these things were addressed without having to go to those extremes, then often the extreme thing never happens if these things were addressed. But this is a part of the penalty of not addressing them, is we get even extreme events happening where people even feel to blame for those extreme events happening to them, rather than seeing that the problem was the person who perpetrated it. So we get all these problems that come about just because somebody wasn't straightforward and honest and open, and weren't brave enough to deal with the criticism coming from others. Yeah. For most of us, you'll find, why has Facebook done so well? Why has Twitter done so well? Why are these mega companies, which are all based on addiction, doing so well? It's because most of you are so worried about what other people think of you. At some point, you're going to have to get over that. God wants you to be you, no matter what anybody else thinks of you. Right? At some point, and this is where our sin is often saying to God, no more love, please, because if I have more love, then I want to be me. And I don't want to be me because my sin says if I be me, I've got this faith that if I be me, everyone's going to attack me. So I don't want to be me. So no more love from you, thank you very much. I'm just going to keep on being not me. I'm going to keep living in my facade. You Americans are very good at facade. You know this about yourselves, right? Most of you are very good at it. You've learnt it over generations of, to be kind and considerate and have a smile on the face. And actually inside you're seething and angry and upset, and isn't it so good? And it's so hard to do. But you become good at it, you see, because you've been taught that having a facade of goodness is better than being truthful about how you feel. Yeah.
It sort of links to another faith, doesn't it? Becca asked about faith. A lot of times we then start to impose these things on God. Like, if I be myself, God won't love me. There's another corrupt faith.
Yeah.
But often that's coming from the society we've grown up in, feeling like if I be myself, no one else will love me.
Yeah.
And then we decide, well, God must have that feeling. And that becomes a big block in our relationship with God.
Yeah. And we also end up with this sort of thing happening where if I be myself, the people on earth won't love me, but God will. But if I be myself,
If I act more.
yeah, if I be a facade with the people on earth in order to please them, then God won't love me. And then, so you end up in these sort of things where you don't do anything at all. Right, where you decide to just take no action, no decision,
No personal exploration, no personal expression, no personal desires, no aspiration, because you think all of those things are going to lead to you being attacked.
I have a question. So related to this sentence, if I tell the truth, I will be attacked. Like I feel it as a fear. Like I have a fear. No,
It's a good thing to talk about. Yeah.
Fear. Let's have a look at fear. Fear is just anger, for the most part. Right? Why can I say that? Well, it's a false expectation that you have that appears real, to you. Ironically, false expectation appearing real spells fear. So you've got false expectation. When you have an expectation that's out of harmony with love and it's not met, anger is the result. Right? Now, when you say, I expect to be attacked, that's a false expectation, by the way, with regard to truth. Like, I share truth with everybody. Some people attack me, but not all. And it's certainly not the majority. So the false expectation says, I'm justified not doing it. I'm justified not telling the truth.
Okay.
The false expectation, what you call your fear, is really just angry about telling the truth. You're angry that if you tell the truth, people might attack you. And you're angry about it. Most of you are angry about telling the truth because you go, I'm not doing it. And the reason why we call it fear rather than anger is because in almost every society, when a person says they're afraid, what does everyone around them do? Oh. Mary's so afraid she shouldn't have to do that. I understand. It's all going to be good. We'll make that go away for you. You're okay. You can just wait there, let yourself sit down. You don't have to do anything. Isn't it right? That's how we view a person in fear. We want to nurse them. And so now it becomes easy for you to say, I'm afraid, because now you can say, I'm afraid, so that means I should be nursed. Does that make sense to you? I'm afraid, so that means I should get away with it. I should get away with having to take loving action now because I'm afraid. That's a good justification for me to not do it.
What we call, I feel that as a fear, is usually, this is my justification. When you start telling the truth in a humble manner, you might feel some fear, but then you'll be feeling it. When we say, when I'm even thinking about telling the truth, I feel like I'm going to be attacked and I'm afraid, usually that's us saying, I'm angry about the fact that I could be attacked. I'm justifying not doing it.
Really what we're saying is I don't want to feel fear.
Yeah.
Which is not the same as feeling fear.
When we feel fear, we won't act in harmony with the fear. So
And
we
you'll
won't
still
justify.
take action.
So we'll tell the truth to everyone, and we might get a bit shaky sometimes. And then we'll
Sometimes
say,
you'll be
I'm
so
feeling
shaky
fear.
that you'll be sitting there shaking afterwards and go, wow, that's pretty hard.
I did that. Yeah.
That was pretty hard doing that. But when you're not prepared to feel fear, now you won't take the action.
And you'll say, I'm afraid.
So it's not fear that's the problem, it's humility that's the problem.
Ah.
You understand? Fear is not a problem. Fear is just sometimes an automatic reaction to a violent situation. You know, it's a feeling that you can let pass through you. Fear isn't the problem. The problem is your lack of humility to feel it. So in other words, what you're saying is, I shouldn't have to feel fear. And if somebody's asking me to feel fear, they're bad, they're wrong, they're hurting me by expecting me to feel this fear, right? So the problem isn't really the fear. The problem is that I'm angry about being humble, right? I just don't want to be humble to the feeling. See, you can still take loving action, and fear might be the result, but you sit down, let yourself feel your fear, and still go ahead and do the loving action. If you're humble, that's what you will do. And ironically, the fear passing through you will probably connect to something in your childhood that passes through you as well. So the next time you come up with that situation, you're going to be less afraid, right? Until you get to the point where you're not afraid at all. So what I've personally found is every single time I've had the media come to talk to us, at the beginning you get quite afraid of it, because you know what they can do. Their motivation is bad. You know that they want to destroy you. You know they want to make your life difficult and everything. In our case, that's the reason why the media talk to us. And if you still go ahead and just go, right, I'm just going to talk to them anyway. You don't have to talk to them either, by the way, do I? I can just say, I don't want it this time. They get pretty annoyed at that too, I've found. but you can do that, right? And so you can go, oh, well, am I going to talk or am I not? And if I am, then it's going to be bad. So let myself feel about it as it's bad and go through the feeling. If I feel there's a good reason for talking to them in this particular case, then I'll make that decision whether I'm afraid or not. Now, as I deal with my fear, the next time I'm presented with the idea of them talking to me, I'll have less fear because I just let go of some. And this fear will be from my past, probably. The reason why I'm afraid of people in authority is usually from my past. And I can let go of some, and so the next time I feel less afraid. Until you get to the point where you're a celestial angel and you're not afraid at all of anybody. You're not afraid of anything, anybody, any pain, any suffering, any feeling, any emotion, any action, right? You're not afraid of anything. But that only happens when you're prepared to be humble to your fear. But what the average person, when they say, oh, but I'm afraid, they're really saying, oh, but my afraid means that I shouldn't have to do it. That's really what they're saying. Because I'm afraid, I shouldn't have to. I shouldn't have to do the loving thing because I'm afraid. That's really the subsequent view. And that's really a state of anger. It's being angry about having to go through the feeling of fear and still do something loving anyway. That's what it is. So the false expectation that everything is comfortable is unrealistic in this life because we live in a world that's sinful. You follow? While we live in a world that's sinful, how can us trying to get out of sin be comfortable for ourselves or even other people? It's not going to be comfortable, but it's something that's necessary. Yeah? So.
And I recognize too through this that I might be afraid of somebody attacking me if I tell the truth, but really what I'm afraid of is facing the emotion of being attacked when I was a child.
Correct. And you're afraid of your own feelings.
Yes.
Really.
So I don't want to feel that feeling, that way deep feeling.
Correct.
Exactly.
Correct. And that's exactly what we do. We sort of want to blame, we shift the blame away from the fact that it's inside me into it being somebody else's problem. But really, a lot of times when we decide to not be humble, we're really saying, I shouldn't have to feel these things that are inside me. Somebody should prevent me from feeling the things that are inside of me.
Right, because I was attacked
When
I
you
was
were a child.
but I never felt it. And
Correct.
So
You weren't even allowed to
and
feel
that's
it.
what created the false beliefs.
Correct. Correct. So that gets stored as an emotional signature. So remember back here, it gets stored in as memories in your soul. That so now this belief is in my soul as an emotion, but it's false. But I think it's true. So I have faith in it that it's true. I have faith that it's what's going to be the result. Yeah.
But this is why if I decide to live in harmony with God's principles, emotionally decide, then I'll always tell the truth, for example. And then whatever's stored in me will come out. And in my experience, that's the only way fear comes out, is when you make the moral choice, I'm going to uphold a principle. Then you don't put your fear as more important than the principle. And then if you're humble in that process, the fear can flow. Yeah.
And that's why you're saying start with the spiritual truths, because it gets you there.
Yes.
You eventually
Much
get to
faster.
the emotions. Yeah. And you'll go, and also when you adhere to the spiritual truth as God sees it, then you'll also allow yourself to go through as many emotions as you need to go through to eventually arrive at that truth inside of yourself. Okay, so.
So I guess obviously one of God's truths is always tell the truth, but so I was. So does this even go? I know the answer is already yes. So when I'm in the steam room, I get so much sexual projection because they're co-ed now.
Yeah.
And it's so uncomfortable for me. I do this, I leave, I do. But I guess what I'm feeling today is the next time I go in the steam room, I'm going to say to these men that are sexually projected, do you know what you're doing is incredibly unloving, and or should I not do that?
Is this a public space?
Yes, it is.
Is it
Then I
under
guess
your control?
No.
So why are you going
I guess
there?
I just need to feel how I feel about
Why are you going there at all?
it. Well, there's a very good question.
If you're going to get sexually projected at every time you go there,
That's a good.
and it's not your space, it's not under your control,
Right.
why are you going there at all?
Well, as I'm thinking, I'm trying to clear out my cold or whatever, but yeah, no, that's.
Well,
thank
can you see that your desire to fix a physical problem
It's creating.
is stronger than your desire
To
to
love
address
myself.
the issue of love of self?
Yeah, because it's really.
Because if the environment is that toxic, then the best course of action surely would not to be
Thank you.
be there.
Perfect. Yeah.
Right. Now,
I didn't even think of that.
if you are there and it happens, then sure, raise it. But you would have to question why you're there in the first place if you know that it's such a bad environment. You know, and you could say to the people involved, you know, who look after the place, look, this is not working because all these men sexually project and so forth. You know, it's not working for me. But at the end of the day, it's their space.
Right.
And you're going there by choice. So the very first thing I would do is not make that choice.
Yeah. Well, the gyms where it's in the woman's room.
Sorry?
The gyms where it's the woman's room, it's fine. It's
Yeah.
just when it's this co-ed stuff. So maybe I could mention to them, look, this co-ed stuff. Anyway.
Well, it doesn't work because men and women sexually projected each other.
It's just.
So until that changes, co-ed stuff probably not going to work. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
So I wanted to ask, I think I heard you say, like in another presentation, that like if we want to remove permanently a wrong belief, like we have to feel it emotionally.
Correct.
So for example, let's say that I have a wrong belief.
Yes.
And
that you'll be attacked.
That I will be attacked.
If you tell the truth, yeah.
Then based on this, like.
So how do you remove it? Is the question.
Yeah, well, like what I'm saying, like in general, like whenever I have like a wrong belief, like based on this, I always have to do the opposite of what, not the opposite, but like I have to do what I think is right in that situation, and then let the emotions come up, and that would be the emotional processing of the wrong belief, basically.
Correct.
Okay.
But also you'll probably be joined with some memories from your childhood through that process, and so you start going through the feelings, because you've got to remember the feelings are the memories. You remember here we were saying that the majority of the feelings, the memories of the soul now have all feeling-based signatures, so they're all emotional signatures attached to different experiences, right? So the memories are these emotional experiences attached to all sorts of senses. So, you know, all your body senses, all your emotions and everything are all attached to these memories. So the memory would eventually, if you allow yourself to feel, the memory of why you feel what you feel will start coming up. So in the case of telling the truth and getting attacked, what will start happening to you if you let yourself feel your fear and you let yourself feel even eventually the grief that you told the truth and you were attacked, because there is grief in that, isn't there?
Yeah.
Like it's sad, isn't it, that you tell the truth, which is a good thing, and then you get attacked for it, which is a bad thing.
Right.
That's a sad thing that you eventually feel. Once you feel that sadness, what will start happening to you is you'll start having memories of where it happened to you in your past. And you'll be able to connect to those memories if you let it happen. You'll be able to connect to those memories at the age they occurred and have a good cry about them. Does that make sense? So one time when your dad did it to you, one time when your mum did it to you, one time, you know, these kind of things will start coming up because you're allowing the feelings. And in the process of them coming up, now you're in a state where you're now realising the sin and where it came from. Now this is a good time also to pray to God for forgiveness of the sin, you know, like to help you release the cause of these things.
And then in that particular thing, I could potentially receive God's love if I.
Well, yeah, if you're repentant for you being a liar, you can say, then of course God can help you address why you've become one.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And under what circumstances you are one. So whether it's this kind of circumstance or these circumstances or so forth, you know, you'll be able to see what they are, and God can show you the circumstances, and you can also feel through those circumstances. There'll be memories attached to those circumstances, and God can help you God can clear out these memories emotionally so that you no longer feel attached to them anymore.
When you start using your will to be honest with other people, will it automatically start becoming easier to be honest with yourself?
Usually it's the other way around.
Because it's hard to be honest with others if you're not honest first with yourself, because what do you got to be honest about?
That's right. The first person you need to start being honest with is not other people, it's yourself.
Sure.
So you need to start with yourself. If you start with yourself, and this applies to almost every problem you will ever face, by the way, start with yourself and start being honest with yourself first. How do you feel? What's your response? Why are you responding the way you are? Be honest about it, and be honest about the memories. Like most people are fairly dishonest about their memories. So they try to convince themselves that things didn't happen when they did, and then they try to convince themselves things did happen when they didn't. You know. And you've got to be really honest with yourself about those things. Now, the more honest with yourself you become, the more easy it is to be honest with others. And the more honest with yourself you become about your humility, in particular, you know, all the things you don't want to feel, and the more honest you become about that, you feel less and less imperative to have to tell everybody else around you what you believe the truth is. Right? And so what you do then is you pray for circumstance. Once you become more honest with yourself about things, you pray for a circumstance to be able to share the truth, but not driven by your demand to avoid your own feelings.
I feel like that's what kind of holds me back, is because I feel the anger.
Yeah.
I don't want to be angry with someone.
Good.
But I get kind of locked down in that space.
Yes.
And
So
just stay quiet.
So you need to deal with the anger and say, all right, what is the anger doing? The anger is a false expectation appearing real to me. So I have an expectation of something, right? And so I'm getting angry because I have an expectation. So what's the expectation?
Just that they're not angry with me, you know, and that they accept what I'm trying to say, or just hear me out.
But that's unrealistic though, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, you get angry with others, so how can you realistically expect others to not get angry with you sometimes?
Yeah.
Isn't a better thing to go, like, the false expectation is, I want everything around me, everybody to like me. That's a false expectation. It's impossible. There's never a time on this earth, that everybody's going to like you. When you're in the celestial heavens, everyone will like you. But only the people in the celestial heavens. There's plenty of people I've rocked up towards being in the celestial heavens where I've gone down to hell and they didn't like me at all. Understand? So you're not, it's not realistic when the sin's involved that everybody's going to like you. So at some point you've got to give up the expectation that everybody likes you. Right? So the expectation that everybody likes you is a sin. And you're not seeing it as one. Does that make sense? And then of course there's an imperative to tell them the truth. You know, tell them off for how much they don't like you or care for you and how wrong they are and all that stuff. Well, that's now you. Do they want to know? Well, if they don't want to know, unless they're in your space that you have control over, if they don't want to know, then let them not know. That's what God does, except when you're in his space. Right? So he lets you know then. And what I mean by that is, unless you want to know and you ask God, he'll tell you straight out. You know? So pray for opportunities to share truth with people in a more loving environment in that regard. Yeah. Make sense?
Yeah, I guess it's, I mean, I do share truth with certain people, but it tends to be the more angry individuals that I don't want to really.
Yeah, so that means the motive of sharing truth in your motive is really to stop attack. Correct. To stop.
And to be liked, I guess,
Yeah. So you need to look at that motive because it's a sinful one. Yeah. Make sense?
Yeah.
You got to love truth because it's
more than you love your own feelings.
more than you love, you're safeguarding your own feelings. You know?
I feel like I have to a certain degree, but it's still got ways to get.
Yeah. When you become really truthful with yourself and with others, you don't feel the need to address everything with them. Because you can deal with all of your own emotions easy enough.
Yeah.
It's when you don't feel you can have your own emotions or deal with them, that's when you feel the need to correct other people more. Yeah. So when we share truth with you, we're not feeling the need to do it. It's more like if you want to have a relationship with God, this is what you're going to have to do. It's not you naughty people, you know, what you're doing.
Fix that so we don't have to
so
feel
we don't
something.
have to feel this or whatever. Yeah.
Well, I feel, I guess, if I can give you a short story over the
Short
weekend.
story. How short?
Very short.
Okay.
So I was just dealing with my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
And my nephew's around, and he wants to express his opinion about.
How old's your brother-in-law?
He's about my age, 35.
And how old's your nephew?
4 or 5.
Yep.
5. He just wants he's not even talking to me, but like a friend in the room about how, you know, at times he feels, you know, he has to use physical violence
towards his son.
Towards his son,
Yeah.
in order to, you know, stop him from acting out.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you
see,
know,
in that case, that's a bit of a different case
yeah,
for me because now the welfare of a child's involved,
yeah,
and the child can't protect itself. So now there's a necessity for me to step in. And what I would say is that there's no circumstance under which you need to physically be violent towards your child. However, there are other methods that you can use to restrict the child's behaviour if it's unloving. One thing you can do is just hold the child.
which is what I do with my daughter.
Yeah, and you can hold the child and restrict the child from the unloving behaviour, and eventually the child will learn that behaviour that behaviour causes more restriction to their will, and after a while they won't want their will restricted, and so they'll work out that, right? So, and you can say that because the child is involved, and a child. The reason why I would say that in every case is because the child is unprotected otherwise. It has nobody acting on its behalf. An adult at least has the ability to act on its own behalf for the most part. A child does not. So under a circumstance where a child's involved, I would always say, what is the truth? Yeah.
Is this a situation where you then find yourself feeling angry?
Yeah. That's when I feel like I'm getting kind of locked down because I can't be, you know, fully truthful with the people I, kind of care about most, in my life, my family, my sister, my mother.
Why can't you be fully truthful?
That's a false belief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See what you just said there? You said it can't be. Yeah, you can.
Yeah, I know. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
Actually, I intellectually, I know that's not the truth.
But you can see again, emotion and intellect can be completely different to each other, can't they? One, your intellect saying that's not true, but your emotion saying, no, I can't.
Yeah.
But why can't you? So that's the thing to look at. Why can't I? So if I tell the truth, what? If I
lose my family,
these are the things you're afraid of, that you're unwilling to be humble about happening. So yeah, what happens to a lot of people is that they view their family as their only welfare ticket, I suppose you could say.
Yeah, and that's not just a physical welfare ticket, but a social and emotional.
Social, emotional, financial, everything. Welfare ticket. So they see their family as and I mean extended family, parents, brothers, sisters, all that. We see our family as these are the people who care for me most. Total crap, to be frank. But most of us want to believe it. And the main reason why we want to believe it, again, is because of some faiths that have been established in our childhood that are completely false.
I want that to be true really badly.
Yeah. And the reality is, it's very unlikely that your family of origin will love you before you love them. It's very unlikely. And very unlikely, the reason why is because they taught you all of your unloving behaviour. You follow? And so when you start growing in love, of course they're going to criticise your new behaviour. And so it's very unlikely they're going to really love you. A lot of families are only together because of the safety net that it provides. And it provides mostly an emotional safety net, right? It also gets us out of the view that we're all equal. Because basically we're saying that my family is more important to me than other people are, right? And in the long run, almost like my first century life was pretty much my whole family didn't like me for a long time. For a long time.
Yeah.
My father was a member of the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem eventually, and he didn't like me very much. He didn't like me most of my life, actually. He loves me now, like Joseph, but back then didn't like me at all. He had a lot of arguments with me, a lot of disagreements. He tried to make my life pretty difficult at times, so difficult that there were a few times where I might have died because of his choices, because of him trying to make my life difficult. And he didn't like me much at all. My mum thought I was crazy, for the most part. She'd follow me around, saying that I was crazy, to a degree, and then after a while she started realising I wasn't as crazy as she thought. But that took time, My brothers and sisters were generally quite disconnected from me in different ways, Frankly, on earth in the first century, there were some of my friends like Apostle John, who was more like my family and Mary, of course, who is my family, more than my family was. And like I said back then, I said to people, look, my family are those who listen to the will of my Father and do it, The ones who receive love, they're my family. They're the ones that are really going to be the people who love you, care about you, and you who enjoy your company. And we've got to get away from this whole concept of family on earth, because in the spirit world you start realizing everybody's your family, not just your family of origin. And you start realizing that a lot of the people that you connect to the most are not your families. And it's only when they have common interests or goals that generally have more connection with them then. So the whole concept of family is actually a flawed spiritual belief. Just the whole concept of it is a flawed spiritual belief.
Yeah, and I just caution you, because really you're relating that you want to love your nephew, but you're putting maintaining ties with your family above the welfare of your nephew, who's the one with the So
I guess the feeling is if I don't rock the boat too much, then I can at least have some type of
this is a faith. This is a false faith. That, you know, if I just compromise the truth a bit, if I compromise myself a bit, I can
The outcome will
maintain
be
things.
better.
Things will work out better than if I'm just solidly truthful right
It
now.
never occurs.
Yeah.
And what we're often doing then is diluting the power of truth. The power of truth, the truth has the power to free people. It has the power to bring about loving solutions. But when we withhold truth, the power is gone. And so what a lot of people finish up doing is they modify and only talk little bits of the truth. And the problem with that is that you're reducing the power of God's truth in every situation. So from God's perspective, His truth is like the power, part of the power that drives the universe. Like every law is based on His truth, every single law. So you think about the structure governing the entire universe, it's all God's truth. That entire structure is God's laws or truth that governs everything. It governs your entire life, your body, your spirit body, your soul, how it interacts. The truth is the thing that does that, because that's what we call law is actually God's truth established as a structure that you now live within. And if you dilute that truth, you dilute the power of it. And so you're going to end up with compromise and, you know, and also you're not going to be happy about it, you'll feel guilty about it. But also on top of that, the power of saying the truth in the moment can be greater. So say, example, let's say you say the truth to your brother. Look, what you're doing is abusive to your child. It's abuse, it's child abuse, which is the truth. Right? If you were an adult doing this, you would be charged with assault. That's also a truth, isn't it, in your country?
If your son was an adult, yes.
If your son was an adult and you were beating him and he brought charges against you, you could be charged with assault. You could be jailed for it, right? Interestingly, not jailed when you do it to a child, but when you do it to an adult, jailed for it, you could be. Now, yeah, if you say it that directly and your brother gets angry and gets bitter with you, you say, look, there's other options. Right, I can talk to you about the other options. There's other options. And he said, no, you're wrong. You know, get out of my house, blah, blah, blah. But see, it's already been said now. It's in his head now. It's now he's got a chance to think about it and go, my brother's probably, you know, he might come to the conclusion after a month or two of being angry with you, you know, he's right, you know. Damn. You know, like he's right in saying that if my son was an adult who I didn't know and I did that to him, that I'd been, you know, get charged. That's right. And, you know, by hearing all that once, he now has the ability to ponder on the truth, whether you're there or not.
You actually enable his free will choices more than in any other scenario. When you're trying to gently, have you thought about, and what about, you know what I do, and all of that is really you saying, I'm going to work to change your will, rather than your will is your responsibility.
He's got to
here's
change
the truth.
it.
Yeah, and here's some here's the truth about how you are currently using your will.
Yeah.
That is putting the responsibility onto him, which is where God puts it as well.
Yeah.
When you try to sort of do this sort of dance with truth, which a lot of us do with others, where it's actually quite condescending to the person as well.
Because it tells them they can't cope with the truth.
You
can't handle the truth.
And you're actually manipulative in that place too, because you're not actually just presenting the truth and leaving the option with them. You're saying, I'm going to manipulate this so you see what I present as a bit more palatable, which is...
But you're only doing it being self-serving, because it's really being done because you're afraid of losing a family. So it's far better just go through the fear of losing a family. You know, in both centuries I lost my family, first century and now.
And you might lose your... I lost my...
For a
In this
period.
life, I lost my family.
And Mary in the first century,
I
same.
have no contact with them. They think I'm a terrible person.
Yeah.
But I was truthful with them. I
And-
remain truthful with them.
And in the first century, Mary lost a family too.
Yeah.
So both of us have experienced that. And was it bad? No.
There's pain. There's been pain for me in this life, in that process. But it has helped me understand the spiritual truth that my family is not more important than any other person, and that I don't need them. You know, before this process, I felt like I needed them for a lot of things that I don't need.
Emotional security, physical security.
My own sense of self was tied up with how they
My
viewed
worth.
me. Yeah.
Once you disconnect, you realise I'm an individual. I can make my way in the world, and the more I become an individual, make my way in the world, the better I'm going to be. Yeah. And so this whole connection to family, which is fundamentally a sin, because from God's perspective, we are all brothers and sisters, right? That, you know, even my so-called children are not my children; they're my brother and sister, right? So I've got my two brothers, which you would classify as my two sons. Now, one of those brothers, he listens to divine truth; the other one doesn't, right? But that's their choice, their decision, you know. And my parents, they don't. My brother, who's 10 years younger than I, he doesn't either, and nor does my sister. And you know, they are part of a religious faith that believes that I'm a apostate, the worst apostate actually, because I'm claiming to be Jesus, right? So they're pretty angry for the most part. Of course, when they see me, they're not so angry because I'm kind and considerate to them, but generally they don't see me because they're too angry to want to visit me. Yeah. But when I visit them, you know, they put all their anger on the back burner because it's hard to be angry with a person who's kind with you all the time. So.
And as you go through this process, you come to feel like I wasn't loving my family before I was honest with them. You come to feel that this is an expression of my love, being truthful with them. And also you come to feel the sin of every time I denied the truth, I was also denying myself, my personality, and that was a harm to me. And that's what I was doing in this family paradigm. I was harming myself a lot by trying to be what they wanted. It's only when I've decided to be who I am and be that with them that I feel like I'm loving them and me now for the first time.
Equal.
They don't believe that, but I know that.
Yeah, we've got a lot of false spiritual beliefs about family. Lots of them. And on earth, you know, it takes, for most people don't get rid of them until the sixth year of the spirit world even. Yeah. Which is sad, really, because if you got rid of them here on earth, you imagine how, if I viewed all of my people that I meet on earth, every culture, every religion, every race, as my brother or sister, can you see it might change the way I act towards them in every case? Yeah. And so it's unfortunate that we don't see things this way because, you know, we see our children even not as our brother and sister. We see them as we own them. They're our property almost. You know, ours. We call them ours. And even that's flawed from God's perspective. It's a false belief. They're not yours. God created their soul and God created the process that creates their two bodies. Right? So all you did was have sex.
Hopefully.
And if you're the mother, you carried the child for 9 months, which is fantastic.
Yeah, which is
you did such a thing.
Not a nothing.
It's not nothing. But it's sort of like.
Then delivery.
And now what? You look after them until they can look after themselves. And if you've educated them right, they'll be able to do that by the time they're 6 or 7, and then you won't need to look after them anymore, and they'll be your self-sufficient brother and sister. This is how God intended it to be. The actual person, there's only one person that you're actually physically attached to. It's your soulmate. And you're physically attached because you are actually half of the same person. You're physically attached. Yeah.
Is
Right.
I'm trying to be mindful of blurting out.
Yeah.
The way you draw the picture, the hazard of it is it, maybe this is not an important question, it's just is the soul actually around, like, you and Mary?
Yeah.
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 So the picture's accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. Whether you know who your soulmate is or not. Yeah.
And the more we get to know who we are, which
Yeah.
is what you guys teach, the more we will draw that, whoever he or she is.
Well,
into our life.
you will attract them into your life, but if you think about it, you're more just becoming aware of God's reality. Because God's reality is you are half of, and that person is the other half. And all you're doing is letting yourself become more aware that that is true. Make sense? Yeah. So when I say aware, soul aware, not just intellectually aware, but emotionally aware, soul aware. Remember we said that everything here, all of your experiences, memories and everything stored in the soul, the whole soul. And your half is storing experiences and the other half is storing experiences. The more and more you join together, it means the more and more you're sharing experiences. Right?
Is it possible that one half can be, well, I know growing, like with you and Mary, you had grown to a place where she came back into your life.
She was always there. I've just become more aware she was.
Right.
So in the first century, Mary was always the other half of me. And all that happened is as I grew and as I become more conscious, and as I had a more closer connection with God, I just became aware that she is me.
Wow. So when you first met her in the first century, you knew it immediately, like you did this time?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But Mary,
but
you
it took me awareness. No, in the first century.
I didn't know what I knew, but I definitely knew. Yeah, like I
You weren't aware that there were soulmates as a spiritual belief.
That's right. But I knew.
You could feel it.
Yeah, I could feel it. That's the one.
And what about in this life?
No. Yes. Well, it's there's a story. Where I didn't have intellectual thoughts about it.
So when we first met, Mary was very troubled by my seeming lack of response to her questions and, what would you say, and attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to have a conversation with you, and you were very quiet.
Which is not like Jesus.
Well, you know.
But he's quite a shy person.
Yeah. Well, AJ is a shy person. Jesus is not very shy.
Not very shy. But what happened was, we don't need the whole story, but through a series of events, my parents actually ended up telling me that Jesus felt that we were soulmates. And the very first words out of my mouth, without any thought, were, "Oh, I knew that." Oh. And then I was I said, "Oh, I knew that." And then the next thing I said was, "I have no idea why I said that." And then I kind of intellectually
and then she couldn't sleep for 3 days.
Yeah, just slept until 3. I intellectually dismissed it as, well, that's rubbish. And I actually said, I bet he thinks that about a lot of women. You know, he's probably moved on. Not really, knowing.
Casanova Jesus.
That was my very dismissive, arrogant viewpoint.
Yeah.
But what happened after that is for 3 days I didn't sleep or eat. And I was going through this sort of intellectual thing of like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I forget this? What's happening?
Why can't I relax?
Yeah, why can't I stop thinking about it, if you like? I had this, and it was like a physical and emotional response that I didn't understand. So we could say I didn't recognize him, or we could say that my soul did and my emotions did, but my intellect was completely
against it.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So that's what happened this time. Yeah.
First century wasn't like that though.
No, it was a bit
Full
more
on.
romantic.
It was full on.
It was full on. It was sort of a romantic. but I had a lot of sexual injuries in the first century about wanting to dominate and control a man through sex because of my history in the first century. And so I was very attracted to Jesus from the first moment that I saw him in the first century. And I wanted to be with him, but I felt like the way I needed to be with him was to dominate him and have control of his sexuality, which he didn't allow, which then created a lot of drama. Yeah.
You mentioned how the spiritual part is first and then the emotional part, and I think where I might be confused is listening to so many years that I thought I was always have to feel, I have to.
Well, all of your beliefs are emotional.
All your spiritual
but you need to understand them as spiritual beliefs instead of just going, oh, I've just got an emotion like I'm just angry or I'm just sad or but a lot of these feelings get triggered by your spiritual beliefs that are also emotional. So an example of that is, you know, with what we just raised here. The feeling you'll be attacked if you tell the truth is a feeling, right? But it's higher than your fear. Fear is just an emotion. You understand? So your fear of telling the truth is just an emotion you need to go through, right? If you come to this conclusion that, like, if you believe no longer that you won't be attacked, well, that's not true either, because the reality is you could be attacked and you might not be, right? But if you're going into every situation thinking, like, if I tell the truth, I will be attacked, then that is a false belief. But the truth is you might be attacked still, right? How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the fact that you might be attacked if you tell the truth? And most of you feel like, well, if that's going to be the case, I don't want to tell the truth. And I'm going, but that's not a moral decision. That's now an emotional one driven by your fear. Right? So that's no longer a moral decision. For me, it's sort of like, there is a moral choice. I tell the truth all the time. Right? The only time I won't is if the situation is not in my control, and also people are not asking for truth, and also there's no children involved, then I will let people do what they want to do for the most part, right? But if the situation is in my control, and there's children involved, or people are forcing themselves on me in terms of their interactions with me, then I must always tell the truth, right? So under those circumstances, I will always tell the truth. Sometimes I'm afraid, well, so feel it. Your emotions are ant emotions. They're the emotions of an ant. You know, in terms of universal importance, your emotions of sin, because remember these are sinful emotions, are ants. They will pass over you, leave you. They're going to be transient. You know, so treat them as such. Treat them as if they're not that important. They're not worth holding on to. They're worth experiencing and letting them go. That's all. You know, the only emotions that are really important are those that are not ants, which are all of their love emotions and all of your truth-based emotions and all of your faith-based emotions. They are all really important. They are not ants, they are like mountains. Yeah? So treat the sin as it deserves. It deserves having no control over your life. But when you have the emotion inside of you of sin, you're thinking it does deserve your entire attention, your entire life, your entire investment. And it doesn't. So fundamentally, your attitude to your own emotions needs to change. And the only ones you need to see that are important are the ones that are worth keeping as a part of yourself, which are all based around love and truth and humility and faith. And all the ones that are not worth keeping are the ones you just got to let pass through you. You just got to let yourself have them. And I mean have them, like properly have them, experience them, have them, so they're no longer able to be experienced anymore. Have them. So sometimes for me that's mean I've cried for weeks on end with some sadness or whatever. To have them. You know, I've got some stuff coming up I can feel. After this trip, I'll have the chance to feel some of it, you know. I'm going to be probably crying for a few weeks or more. When I get back home, I can feel it. Like, building up, and I need to just let myself have them. Of course, when we're travelling every day or every week, it's pretty hard to have them, but let yourself have them. Create a circumstance, an environment where you can have them. And they're just minor, no matter how bad they are, they're minor, because if they're sin, they will pass. They won't be permanent. So they'll be gone. But only if you feel them. If you don't feel them, they're stored. Remember, they're stored in this container, which is you. They're stored in you. And if you don't feel them, nobody else can feel them for you. Nobody else can change them for you. Only you can. God can't change them unless you're prepared to feel them. So remember, the free will of the soul is that God can't influence your soul in any way unless you let him. Unless you want him to. You not just let him. It's not just a submissive, oh yeah, no worries. Do your thing with me. It's not like that. It's like, I want you to.
Some of us would like that. Okay.
It's going to require effort on your part to get to the stage where you want him to. Where it's a passion that you feel, that you want God to actually forgive you for the things that are sins inside. And it's going to get to the point where it's such a passion that you desire repentance rather than just something that you've been told that you have to do. Yeah? So this is where it requires a big shift in our way of thinking about things. The shift away from thinking that our emotions are very important in the sense that they are defining the rest of your existence. They're not that important. What's going to define your rest of your existence is your principles and the feelings that you let pass through you as you engage those principles. Right? That's what's going to define the rest of your existence. Your choices, your will, the way in which you're choosing to use it. That's what it will do. Eugene?
So, what are some of the ways we can identify spiritual sin? Because this is the most core thing that we should be addressing in the property.
Good question, yeah. Okay, so what I would do is, can I rub some of this off now?
Yeah. And I might just repeat the question, just for the sake of recording. So the question is, what are some of the ways we can start to identify spiritual sin, given that they have the most governance over our life?
Okay, so the first thing, Jean, is to be honest with yourself about what you're focusing on inside of yourself. So an example of that is, let's say I've got some physical ailment, right? I know you well enough to know what your ailments are, right?
Got a lot of them, sure.
Yeah. So let's say you've got some physical ailment, and let's say your focus is trying to fix the physical ailment, right? So that's telling you now that you're looking at a physical problem, isn't it? Not a spiritual one. So straight away you know that if you're honest with yourself, you know you're not going to hit the nail on the head, as the saying goes. You're not going to get to the cause of it, because you're focused on the physical problem and you're not looking at it as a spiritual one. Now let's say I've got a sexual problem of some kind, like men impotence, women lack of desire to, lack of ability to orgasm or something like that. Let's say I've got some sexual issue and I focus on trying to solve that sexual issue, right? Now I know that I'm focusing on the sexual issue rather than the spiritual one. Do you follow?
Yep.
So straight away, I can start to look at the hierarchy of what I'm looking at and compare it with what I've been told. At this stage, it's only what I've been told is the real problem. So Jesus is telling me that the real problems for every physical problem and every sexual problem and every emotional one really is a spiritual problem. But I'm saying, no, it's not. I'm saying, no, I don't agree with that. I think it's a physical problem. And I'm going to look for a physical solution for my physical problem. All right? So if you're looking for a solution that's in line with the physical, then you know you're not looking at a solution that's spiritual. Can you see that?
Absolutely.
And if you're looking at a solution that's sexual in nature or medical in nature, which is physical, you know that you're not yet focused on the spiritual problem. Can you see? So one of the first things you can start doing is you can start talking to God about it. You go, I need to know what the spiritual problem is. So I need to focus my area of investigation not on the physical and not on the sexual and not on the emotional, but I need to focus on what is my spiritual belief that causes these problems to occur. So that's number one. So where you put your attention is where you're focused. And if you're putting your attention on a physical solution, then you're focused on a physical solution and you're not even looking at a spiritual one. So before you can find a spiritual solution, you've got to be focused on one. That makes sense, doesn't it? Logically, if I'm focusing all of my attention on the physical, am I even considering the spiritual problem?
I never do that. I use it as a temporary solution, but I never address the spiritual.
Correct. Yeah, so you can be quite, in your self-analysis, and if you're honest with yourself, you can easily see where you're focusing your attention, right? Now, the main reason why most of us focus on one of these two and sometimes the third, the emotional, is because we want some kind of instant solution, something that requires me not having to change a sin. So in other words, what we do is we're saying to ourselves, and this is sort of the internal dialogue, if you like, is saying, changing the sin is hard. So this is what we're saying to ourselves. I don't want to change the sin anyway because I like it, right? So what else can I change other than the sin? That's the general approach we're taking, right? So what we're really saying, well, can I change something physically and then it's fixed? Can I change something sexually and it's fixed? Can I change something emotionally and it's fixed? And all the while we're saying spiritual, no, there's no problem spiritually. There's just an emotional, sexual and physical problems. And while I can focus on that, I can say to myself, there is no spiritual problem. Right? So the key part first is to identify that every problem comes from a spiritual sin. Every problem. Now, it may take me years to come to terms with that one concept, right? And frequently people who listen to Divine Truth, it takes them anywhere up to 15 years to come to terms with that one concept and actually feel it as a truth. See, there's a difference, isn't there, if you're hearing it and it going in there and often, as they say, out the other side. But it's very different than that actually becoming now what you believe in your soul, that every problem I have is a spiritual one. Right? So for me, when I look at all of my problems, I see them all as spiritual problems. Every problem I face, every physical infirmity I have or have had in the past have all been spiritual problems. As I deal with the spiritual problem, they heal themselves. Right? So this has given me faith to understand that everything is a spiritual problem. Right? So that's number one. Once you know that every problem you have is a spiritual one, and once you feel that is worth investigating, now can you see you're going to be more sincere about asking God what the problem is?
Yes.
Because you've come face to face with the fact that it is a problem and it is a spiritual one. So now you can start looking at your life and analysing, going, what causes me and what situations am I in where this problem exhibits itself, right? So, let's say I've got a physical problem, such as that. Let's say, in my case, I had hay fever all the time. One problem. You know that one, right? So, I had hay fever all the time. Now, initially, I blamed it on the environment. Things that used to set me off were things like pine needles, hay, pollen. That's what I thought. Cats. I thought I was allergic to cats whenever I was around a cat. Boom, away it goes. My nose just dripping like a sieve. So, seemingly looks like a physical problem. Right? Now, the solution of my mum and dad was to just give me some what are they? Histamines, that's it. And to make it go away. And of course, I always felt doped up and a bit brain dead and everything else as a result of those medications when I was a child. Anyway, as time went on, I started realising that actually this physical problem was just getting worse. But I started noticing some things. I started noticing, with cats, why was that? Like, it's just an animal and there were other animals like possums. In Australia, we have possums, which are marsupial, not like your possums here. And I was perfectly happy to have one of those, like I nursed one from a tiny baby right the way through to maturity, wasn't allergic to it at all. So here's one, it had fur, just like a cat has fur, and yet I was not allergic to the possum being on my body all the time. Like, for nearly 4 months I had to have it in my pocket, and it was so small that it was sort of tiny, and feed it with a little eyedropper and everything, and it grew. Of course, they grow fairly large, and it used to sit on my head and while I was walking and all sorts of things. And it was like no problem at all with that animal. But with a cat, whew, as soon as it was there, bang. And after I started going through, realising there's a spiritual problem here, right? And I didn't really consciously even know that there was, but I knew there was something beyond, because I'm comparing, I'm seeing. So I start seeking. And it got down to the fact that I started allowing myself to have my memories about cats. My father's got a lot of anger towards cats. There were one place we went to, there were about 35 or 40 cats in this house, and they'd just gone rampant right in the house, and because the owners didn't control them. So my dad got a gun, and we shot all the cats, like every one of them. And I dug a big hole, like a grave, and we threw all of the bodies in this grave. Right? That was one of my childhood experiences. That happened when I was about 8 years old. Right? Now, that was the first time I can remember being allergic to a cat. Before then, I used to have the neighbour's cat sit on my lap, and I'd pat it all day outside, and I wasn't allergic. But that was the first time I was allergic. So now I'm starting to see, it's a love issue here, where love was withdrawn, when my dad's angry. I processed that and no longer allergic to cats anymore. So I no longer got hay fever from cats anymore. But I still got it from hay. Right? And then I had to let myself feel, I had to go to hay, feel what it felt like. And what I started realising there was I felt a lot of discomfort, and without me knowing, it was memories about our first century life, actually, a lot of that. And where I felt times when I was in discomfort in the first century, and I had memories of that, and I didn't understand it at the time. But once I allowed myself to feel about those matters, these, again, emotions that I had to feel, which were related to, again, spiritual beliefs that natural things cause my problem, was the spiritual belief. The spiritual belief was that nature is causing my problems. And once I grieved the idea that nature caused my problems, nature stopped causing my problems. Right? I know it sounds quite simple, but I didn't get allergic to hay anymore, or pine needles anymore, or any of those things anymore. So now I don't have hay fever ever, like ever. But up until I was 33, I used to have it all the day, every day, pretty much. Yeah. I still carry handkerchiefs around. But they don't use for my nose much anymore, Yeah. So I had to come to terms with the fact that there were spiritual issues where love was withdrawn, and I had to deal with the feeling that I have about love being withdrawn. And that then caused a solution to some of these problems. That makes sense? It's just an example.
It makes sense, but I'm still trying to figure it out, like specifically, did you have like an emotional, like, for example, nature culture problems, was it a set of...
Yeah, with you it's a bit different. What happens is whenever you get around women, you have a response. Yeah.
It's a lot
It's
about
oppression.
Oppression, yeah.
For you.
So for me,
Yeah.
hay fever was a lot about
Mary was the same.
feeling
Oppressed.
that love is oppressive. And then when I would be around certain things that were related to childhood memories, I would feel oppressed by the
and want to cry
physical.
but wouldn't let cry.
Yeah.
Wouldn't let herself cry.
So-
And so it starts, your nose starts running.
Yeah, so the spiritual beliefs was love is oppressive, I'm weak if I cry, these
Okay,
kinds
so
of...
those are some of the spiritual...
Yeah, so about love and humility, those two beliefs then cause me to have sort
Women
of...
feel I'm weak when I cry,
Yeah.
is one of yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it creates a sort of a... When you're around a like a physical thing that has been associated with the formation of those beliefs, you start to get a physical symptom which is actually related to the spiritual belief. Yeah. So if you remember that every problem is caused by some missing the mark
Of
when
love.
when it comes to love, truth, faith and humility, that can help you start, okay, I'm having a physical problem, I'm having a sexual problem, I'm having a relationship problem. What kind of beliefs do I have around, relating to love, truth, faith and humility, relating or that are being exposed in this situation, in this...
And don't focus on other people, because they're your issues, not
your beliefs,
not theirs. You know, every time you focus on another issue, another person, you're disempowering yourself from dealing with your problems. So it's our problems, like. So even if I believe that Mary should love me, that's an actually false belief. She shouldn't love me. Even if she's my soulmate, she doesn't have to love me. You follow? At some point in the future, she will. Because I'm so adorable. But you know, she doesn't have to. Yeah. And if I expect that she does have to, I'm already in a false belief. That false belief is going to cause problems in our relationship. So that if I expect that she loves me and she doesn't, right, then of course that means that I'm putting expectations upon her and then she's not meeting them, I'm going to get angry. So it's going to cause problems. I've got to deal with my expectation that my soulmate should love me. And for me that was a lot about grief about losing my soulmate. And processing through all of that. For you, it would be mostly grief about your mother's not loving you. If you're a heterosexual male, for example, it would be about that. And if you're a woman, probably to do with your father and rejection from your father. And there'll be grief to go through there. But it's a spiritual problem. It begins with the spiritual problem that they should. This whole concept that anybody should do anything is already out of harmony with free will. So, you know, the fact is when I go, Mary should, I'm really saying she hasn't got free will, so she should do these things that I think she should do, right? And she shouldn't. Like, she needs to do what she feels is right. Even if what she feels is right is wrong, I can't tell her, I can share with her if she wants to hear it that they're wrong, but if she doesn't want to hear it, I can't even do that. Right? Mary says, I don't want to hear from you. Oh, fair enough. Yeah. So every one of our physical problems is going to start with a spiritual one. And then it filters into our emotional state, because every belief is attached to emotion as to why we believe it. Right? So, you know, even this one that we had before, you know, about telling the truth, can you see, if I tell the truth, I'll be attacked. That's a spiritual belief about truth, right? But you can see that's joined with past attack and our feelings about past attack. So they're feelings about what do you feel when you're attacked. As a child, a lot of our worth is dependent upon what our parents felt about us. And so you start believing you're bad when people attack you. Right? So when people get angry with you, you start thinking, oh, I deserve it. almost, or I feel bad about myself because they're attacking me. But actually, that's also not true. People don't attack you because you're bad. People attack you because of their own problems, right? You could be a bad, evil person, and nobody should attack you if they loved you. They wouldn't attack you, right? But this belief obviously has attached itself to lots of emotions about, I don't want to feel what it feels like to be attacked, how bad I felt when I was attacked, how terrible I felt when my mum and dad, in particular my mum and dad, felt I was worthless, and how they treated me while I was worthless under certain situations. And when they told me the truth, they were trying to put me down and make me feel bad about myself all the time, And so there's a lot of emotions that are attached to the belief. And so the belief is established now, and there's all these emotions that are going to have to be felt in order for the belief to leave me. And that's the goal. Have the belief leave you. Now, if you look at the sin you commit in that belief, God will give you the grace, and when you're repentant for that sin, the grace will come and remove the bad feelings from your childhood that cause you to sin that way. So that's one way you can get rid of them, by asking God, by being repentant for what you do because you have that sin, right? The other way is forgetfulness, where you're going to have to do that yourself. So you have to just keep on processing, releasing the emotion until you get to a point where there's no more emotion left. And then you'll be done. So that's one way. And the other way, which is God's way, is that you become aware of the sin and you go to the point of awakening for the sin, the fact that this is a false belief and it's wrong, and that you're doing a lot of bad things thinking this. And you focus on all the bad things you've done doing this. And you let yourself feel about all the bad things you've done doing this, and feel about whether you want to keep doing them. And you can pray to God for forgiveness, and then God can come and get rid of the memory, the childhood events that caused you to do this. Right? So that's the second way, the easier way, but it's not the way most people are following. Right? The way most people are following is the first way, where they just feel about it again, feel about it again, feel it about it again. 10, 20 years' time, you're still feeling about it again, but the feelings in 20 years' time will be less than the feelings today. And they feel about it again and again until there's no feelings left. That's called forgetfulness. That's the natural love way. That's compensation. That's what it means. Right? That's not the same as God's way of dealing with these beliefs. God's way is to actually feel about all the consequences of having the belief, and to feel about all the things you did wrong in that belief, and how do you feel about doing those things wrong in that belief, and would you like God to forgive you for doing those things? And then if you have a pure, sincere desire for God to forgive you doing those things, then God's love can come and forgive you, but also get rid of the process of forgiveness is forgetfulness. He rubs out your emotion as to why you believe that. Right? And then that emotion is gone. Now you don't believe it anymore. Right? And you'll know when you don't believe it anymore, because you'll tell the truth to everybody now, without being worried about getting attacked. That's when you don't believe it anymore. So if you're still worried about telling the truth, then it means it hasn't happened yet. So it's easy to measure whether it's gone or not, just through what you do. It automatically do. That makes sense to all of you? Yeah. Now, time.
Yeah, it's full.
Yeah. So what we'll do tomorrow is we want to focus a bit more on this whole concept of these spiritual beliefs and how they cause these problems. And perhaps in the process, some of you can ask about personal situations, and we can say, right, what's the spiritual beliefs? What is causing you to feel that this is true, and then causes you to, and what sinful actions are you taking in that belief being justified? Because every belief you end up justifying in yourself, and then you take action that is sinful. And how would you go about repenting for such actions? How would you go about becoming aware of the effects of the sin, and finish up becoming aware of, this belief that I'm going to get attacked for my truth, this is the sin. How do I get to that point? And then how do I feel, about all the things that I did in that belief? All the times when I've been untruthful, all the times that I haven't shared the truth, all the times I've withdrawn, all the times I've justified or shifted blame or lied, or, how do I feel that to the point where I'm now sincere enough to ask God for forgiveness? So in other words, I'm sincere enough to repent, and God can then forgive me for those things. And in the process of forgiving us, you will actually feel the cause, the childhood things go away if you're prepared to feel them. Of course, you have to be prepared to feel them. And God can sort of reach in, help you feel them, they're gone. And then once they're gone, your behaviour will change automatically. Right? So you'll no longer be afraid of sharing the truth, as in the example we gave. You'll no longer be afraid of it in any situation, even if your life is threatened. You won't be afraid of it anymore. Right? And so when it comes to a little simple issue of like, Mary's going to be upset with me telling the truth, I don't love her anymore. I've got to tell her. Right? I won't be worried about it because I've dealt with the sin, and so I know it's right to, even if Mary's like up in arms and like wants to attack me for the rest of her life, and we got children and she wants to take the children away and I never see them again, and even if all those things happened, I would not feel bad about it if I've dealt with the sin. You see, it's sort of, this is why it's so important to deal with the sin, because you can actually take loving actions and you can be happy about them rather than unhappy about them. Yeah. So that's what we'll do tomorrow. We'll have more of a discussion about that. Sound all right?
Yeah.
Tomorrow we also may need to discuss a little bit about how spirits are affecting your sin as well, because a lot of us don't understand, how open we are to those packages of thoughts, and what causes the openness to the thoughts that get popped into our mind to do things that are out of harmony with love by others, whether they come from people on earth or in the spirit world. So we need to understand a bit of that. So we'll try to incorporate that tomorrow, but we'll see where it goes. Sound all right? So we will start again at 11 tomorrow. I think we'll probably start again 11 on Sunday too. Yeah.
Yep.
We were going to try to see whether to start at 10 on Sunday, but as it turns out, Mary and I are probably going to have to change all of our flights Monday and everything. So
So we'll just keep the program 11 till 4,
Yeah.
all 3 days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely to meet you all.
tonight?
Homework?
Homework?
Yeah, like you did last weekend.
What homework did we give the last weekend on the first half? Oh,
Feel what it feels like to fight for your sin.
Yeah.
well, yeah. When you fight for your sin, how does it feel inside of you? What do you do to fight for your sin? Does that make sense? Because if you can recognise what you do to fight for it, then maybe you'll stop the fight.
What do you mean by fight for it?
Well, most of you,
Defend
like,
it.
most of you
Defend for
have
the
an angry
defend.
reaction when your sin is pointed out. So that's one thing you do to fight for your sin. You just get angry with somebody and say, no, it's not my fault, it's yours. And so what techniques do you use? And in particular, how does it feel when a sin is pointed out? How do you feel? And then what do you do with how you feel? So when a flaw is pointed out, what do you do with it? Make sense?
Yeah, it's not just going to be one response.
Yeah.
We've got a library.
Hundreds,
Yeah.
And usually you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then
Go
you
back
get
to 1.
1, 2, 3. You end up doing it in a bit of a cycle.
Do you need any help with any?
No,
I
just
think we're right.
you can make sure you take